Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if it's your first time. I'm Kat, and on this channel, I basically give you guys messages from spirit along with some beauty vlogs, and I talk about any sort of normal 3D every life topic that spirit wants me to talk about. So today I am talking to you all about my experience and how my spiritual awakening catapulted me to New York City. If you watched my first story time, I guess you could say, I discussed my spiritual awakening and how I awakened 5 to 6 years ago now in 2016. I was 22 years old at the time, and I had just graduated from college. I feel like spirit really I just knew that was the time. It was like I was in a new chapter in my life. And I want to say right now as well, a lot of people who watch this channel, I feel like the collective that I am channeling for, most of you all are going to already have been awakened, and you are now in subsequent awakenings. You know, once you awaken, your life is just a series of awakenings. And so you might be on your second or your third or your fourth. And, you know, we're constantly transforming and evolving. And so this channel is just kind of a place where hopefully maybe, you know, you might meet other people in the comments who are on the same journey as you. And it's just a place for light workers and way showers to come together and feel like, oh my God, somebody else has had the same experiences that I've had. So I think the thing that is most scary about awakening, and most of you will know this, is that it's like you're catapulted into a completely new reality. And that's what happened to me when I was 22 years old. And this was a year before I moved to New York City, or a year and a half. And it's so scary because there's so much going on mentally and physically. And I remember at that time, I should have mentioned this in my awakening video, but I genuinely thought at one point that I should be checked into a mental institution. I thought that I was schizophrenic. You know, I was hearing voices in my head. I was getting all this strong intuition, and you know, there are physical ascension symptoms as well. It's kind of harder to remember those now, but you know, a lot of people will talk about feeling like physically ill and things like that. And so, well, and then that leads me into today's topic, which is that, so I want to say, so I woke up around, I want to say June and July of 2016. And then I had this depression when I was still living in this same apartment around March of 2017. So, is that right? Yeah, it is. So I had been living in this place for about a year, and my lease was about to be up in May. And so I was living in New Orleans. I went to college down there. And I really wasn't fitting in very well in the city. I was kind of networking in my industry. I'm in the entertainment industry, but it was so hard to make headway, and I was having a really hard time making money. And, you know, I was getting financial support, and I was feeling really guilty about it. And I was very much, my financial worries really spiraled out of control and put me into this depression. And I remember there was one day where I literally, the thoughts were spinning and spinning around in my head to the point where I just ended up dropping to the floor. Not like collapsing physically, but just the energy that was with me and in me was so heavy that I just couldn't. I needed to be on the floor. And if any of you have ever dealt with depression, specifically spiritual awakening depression, or clinical depression, you know what this is like. And I just laid on the floor, and I would lay in my bed, and I remember I finally got up, like I peeled myself out of the bed maybe a night or two or three later. And I went to CVS and got some Reese's cups, and I realized that like I was going to be okay. I was going to relearn how to take care of myself, but I would experience these insane migraines, and I know that this was part of my awakening. I feel like this was planned all along. Like my higher self and my guides, we knew that I was going to experience this depression. And I think that, I've heard this saying that way showers typically will experience the depths of the darkness. And if you experience the depths of the darkness, the extent to which you go down to the depths is the experience of which you have the capability to embody light in the opposite direction. So the more you've experienced, the more like horrible things you've been through, I mean, the more light you have to give to the world. And I think that can be a very like divisive saying in just the 3D world, but I'm sure you all understand what I mean. And that will resonate with you in your soul. So anyway, I ended up being in this depression for about, 1 or 2 weeks. And I ended up talking to my parents, and I would just cry on the phone. And my mom was like, you need to come home. You need to come home for a while. So I went home to South Carolina, and I started to get better finally. And then when I went back to New Orleans to my apartment, and I said, I'm not gonna allow myself to have these thought spirals anymore, because this is what is, creating this depression. I can't worry to this degree. I gotta chill. And I ended up deciding to go to the career counselor at my school. They have like postgraduate career counseling. They have a career center. So I went on the website and I booked an appointment through like an appointment portal, right? And you can pick the name of the person you want. I didn't know who any of the people were, like the counselors, so I just picked a name. And then the system glitched and it picked a different name. And, I was in my awakening. Even though I was very depressed, I was awakened. I had my intuition. And I was like, I'm not going to go back and change that, because I know that that is for a reason. And I didn't really think much of it beyond that. But so I went into this woman and we talked, and I, showed her my resume, and I said, I really want to go. Well, I was like, I want to be focusing in the entertainment industry, and I'll talk to you all more about what I do in my career later. But she said, okay, so what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I was sort of dreaming a little small. And she was like, okay, but what do you really want to do? And I was like, I had never really thought about that before. I had never allowed myself to think big like that before. And I just blurted out, I want to move to New York City and pursue the entertainment world in New York. And she was like, she looked me in the eye and she was like, well, why don't you do that? You have the credentials for this. Why don't you just go do that? And I was like, okay. And I remember I went and sat on the steps of the alumni house and just sobbed, because the truth had finally been able to like come out of me, And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna move to New York. And I called my parents and I was like, I think I wanna move to New York. And they were like, well, we've been waiting on you to say that. And so, you just know when you're on the right track, when things start to sort of line up. Like there's not resistance. I thought there was gonna be so much resistance around this. I was like, New York, that would be the hardest thing in the world to acclimate to New York. I've only been there to visit. I don't know anyone there. And so I let my lease go that May, and I ended up spending the summer at home, and I ended up actually spending a summer in Italy before I went to New York. And I'm really glad I did that, because I think I learned a lot of lessons that my guides wanted me to learn before I went to New York, like just living in another city where there weren't so many consequences for my actions. I could just kind of learn how to navigate like a big bustling city, even though I had been in New Orleans. It's sort of a mid-sized city, but just really be in this big cosmopolitan city and just sort of fend for myself. I'd always been doing that, but just without a car. It's just more of like a New York type of city in some ways. And there wasn't like the safety net of my university. You know what I mean? Like that community. I knew how to be alone in a big city by myself with no community. So then I was looking for like jobs and stuff. And I was channeling in my journals at this point. I would channel messages from spirit, and I didn't really think much of it. And you can't, if you channel, you can't really remember the message. You have to look back and read it because you are in the moment channeling. And so I got back to the US December 2016, and I started looking for apartments in January to move to the city. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys. That was 2017. I came back December 2017, and I was planning to move January, February 2018 to New York City. And I knew one person in New York, and I was channeling during that winter time in preparation to move. And the channelings were like, you need to contact this person, this like older man who is advanced in his career. You need to contact him. I got that twice. And I listened to it on the second time when I looked back through my journals because I couldn't remember what I would channel. And I just messaged him and said, hi, I'm thinking about moving to New York. Do you know of any like jobs? What else are you gonna say? And he said, let me get back to you. And within 24 hours, he said, I have a job for you starting in the spring. I mean, your intuition is correct. You just have to start listening to your intuition. So I ended up finding a place, and I sublet from a girl who, she was in my industry. We haven't really talked since, but just the coincidence of her being in the entertainment world was so incredible to me. It just made me feel connected already, even though I barely knew anyone in the city. And it was a very intense transition because New York is quite an intense energy. I got an apartment in Chinatown for a month, and I sublet there, and then I moved to the Lower East Side, which I had no idea at the time was a very trendy area. And this girl who I took over her apartment, I ended up with a great roommate, and this girl whose room I took over, she left her furniture for me. So I had like free, beautiful furniture. And I was just feeling so beyond blessed. I was so supported when I moved up there. And so it's really, basically, I lived there for 2 years as well, I should say. And now I don't live there anymore, and I will get more into why I don't live there anymore. And that's like a whole other spiritual story. But to sort of bring it back to spirituality and intuition and, awakening journeys, I think that, a lot of the awakening symptoms, especially when you're first awakening, they are so jarring and so scary. And the depressions or other sort of symptoms that manifest as physical illness, mental illness, are so scary. And I think that spirit wants to toughen us up so that we learn how to cope with the very dense energies that we came here knowing that we would be living in. Dolores Cannon, the great spiritualist who died a few years ago, she said, Earth is a school. And, there's so many lessons. We're constantly learning lessons because this whole thing is like going to high school, going to college, and dealing with mental illnesses that arise because of our culture. That is part of Earth School. And it really strengthens us so much. And it's, that's such a heavy topic, and it's something that you could talk about for hours. But in the end, I am grateful for that depression because it sat me down and forced me to go into a different direction. And if I had been, I was very deeply programmed about worrying about money and feeling lack, even though I actually have a very abundant Western life. And I think that I wouldn't have manifested that depression if I had been able to break out of that programming on my own. But Spirit knew that that was the only way to get me out of it. And so once you understand, you're gonna manifest physical or mental illnesses as long as there's programming within you that you cannot recognize just because you're so deeply within it. And you can start to use these illnesses and ailments to your advantage if you can say to yourself, instead of saying, oh my God, I hate this, this sucks so much, which of course you're allowed to do because it sucks. But then after that, you say, what is this trying to teach me? What is this trying to get me to do? What am I not hearing from my guides? What are the limitations that I'm creating for myself, my own mental prisons? Yeah, I think that's really it. So in the end, I'm very grateful for that depression. It changed my life and it got me to New York, and being in New York changed my life. And I could do a whole other video about my time living in New York and, how the people I met there and the opportunities I had will forever change the course of my life. All right, I think that's enough for today. This is a 16-minute video. So I will be filming a few more today. You can check those out as well. And please like and subscribe so that we can start to grow the community. The community is so small right now. There's basically no one. So hopefully it will start to grow. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your time and your attention. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye.